This is the second topic of the world of storytelling tips, and my topic is how to own your story. First, we have to clarify what we mean by the word own. It's it's not the owning of real property that you have the rights to sell. It's like just figurative possession of your story. Because when you tell the story that you might have heard from somebody else, or someone wrote it, or it was told to you by a member of the community, or you have read it somewhere, but when you tell it, it's like you wrote it yourself. It's like an original story because the way you tell it, your heart, your body, and even your voice coincide together that people will say, oh, you own that story. As I have said in my first video on how to choose your story, my sharing always comes from my own personal experience. And the first tip that I can give is know your story. But it's not only knowing your story, it's also knowing your story by heart. Some stories, the message are really mentioned, but some stories you have to read it and know it so that you will be able to get the message. And when you believe in the message and you know it by heart, then you focus in that when you tell the story. Of course, you also have to know in your story what happened from situation 1, 2, 3, and until the end. And of course, you also should know who are the characters of the story, and what is the problem, and how was the problem solved. And also important is when and where did the story happen. Because when you know those things, even if you are, sitting or walking or whatever you're doing, you can tell that story with your heart, because the story always comes from the heart, not from your mind or from somewhere else. Because if there is beauty with the heart, there is always story with a heart. So know your story very well. Tip number 2, tell the story the way you want to tell it. You can do that by using your own words. There might be some words, upon knowing who your audience are, there might be some words that are not appropriate for your audience, like very violent words, like kill. They kill the giant. It might be, very violent for young kids. So you wanted to change it to something like, they subdued the giant until the giant lost his breath. Something like that. It's more friendly. Now, if you tell the story using your own words, it's like that it comes from your own self, from your own mouth, because you are very comfortable telling that story or verbalizing that story. And tip number 3, you really have to rewrite or write the story that you have heard or you have read somewhere else. You rewrite it the way you want to tell it. So when you write your story, there is a saying that simplicity is a thing of beauty. For me, as a storyteller, I am fond really of using simple words and simple sentences, because if you use long, complex, compound sentences, because you're telling a story and the words might be lost somewhere else and you won't be understood. Unless if you're using storytelling to enhance the vocabulary of your listeners, then you really have to get used to those words, although they're not very, very conversational for you. Because for me, storytelling must always be conversational, but um, you really have to do it because it has another function. Then the fourth tip will be put your mark or your strength in the story. You know how to sing, or you know how to create movement, or you know how to play instrument. Oh, by all means, put it there. What I did with Tilin, the movement of pounding the rice and sifting the rice, cleaning it, is integrated in the whole story. Like it's weaving the whole story. Also, my story on the legend of Apu Santawa, the drumming weaves the story. Then one of the stories also that I tell, um, the story of the human race. If you have listened to it, I use chanting to weave the whole story. So you can do that. That is putting your mark or interpreting your story using your skill. Now, if you don't have those skill, there are other means to do it. Remember, I always remember my teachers in theater that there is 1001 to kill a cat. Creativity is the key word here. You let your imagination work on how to treat your story. And now this is a reminder, especially for young storytellers and those who wanted to become storytellers. Although you figuratively own your story, you're figuratively possessing it, never fail to acknowledge your source. Um, what country does your story come from? What community? Who told you the story? Who wrote it? And where did you first hear it? Those things are very important because it's part of storytelling, like it's a protocol or storytelling ethics that you always, don't forget this, you always acknowledge the source of your story because you owe it from them. It's not your own, although you wanted to own it, but it's not yours, so you really have to acknowledge your source. So I hope that is helpful to neophytes or new or young storytellers, and I'm very glad for you listening to my sharing. Don't forget, subscribe and hit that bell for notification of new video uploads. Thank you for listening.